Everybody ready?
Yep.
Yes.
Ready as we're gonna
Yeah.
be.
Ready as you're gonna be. This is gonna be great. It's gonna be absolutely wonderful.
It is gonna be fun though.
No, it will be fun.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
I want another piece of
Yeah.
art behind me.
Thank you guys for joining in today. Yeah. No, I think it will be. It'll be enlightening, if nothing else, enlightening. But thank you guys for joining us today. We yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Turn off my sound.
There you go.
How to do it? How to do
Yeah.
it?
Now I'm cool. Now I'm cool. But thank you all for joining us here today. We're gonna give it probably a few more minutes, see if a few more people pop in. Until then, how is everyone doing? Dee, how are you?
Good. I'm
Good.
okay. Yep.
Cool. Agnes.
I'm great. It's Friday. I'm so excited.
And Beth, how are you?
I'm good.
I'm good. Just as all.
I'm like, you want the long story or the
Nope.
no, I'm good.
Get that long story later.
Yeah, no, I mean there's this like no, good.
You good
So
so
far.
far? No?
Yeah.
Okay, good. But yeah, I'm gonna figure I'm gonna start a little bit now. Uh, thank you who are here for joining us. We are gonna be discussing Black History Month and part of this Black History Month. If you all have read the invite, we have it. I'm gonna just read it right back to you because that's literally what we're going to be talking about. And it's in conjecture we realize that people do not know much about history regarding Black Americans. Some people are apprehensive to ask questions, and I wanted to make a forum that would be free for that, but also be not a debate, but lessons and understanding things and learning a lot more about the history of African Americans than most people have been exposed to. Even we as Black Americans, there's tons of history that has been watered down, that has been abbreviated, yeah, shortcutted through to make it seem as though that was just a blink or just a kind of a wink in time. And in actuality, a lot of the circumstances that Black Americans have gone through beyond slavery have occurred in long stints and long stretches, and some of it in basic ways continues to occur now, even though most people feel they want to be in a denial of that. But that's neither here nor there. Today, we're going to discuss those things that people want to know about, and as well as giving a lot of information of what people need to know, and hopefully encouraging everyone to start reading a lot more than you normally would about the history of Black Americans, history in general, going deeper into our history, and especially the history of America and the history of the colonies and how they were established, and the histories of Europe and how all of those interchanging places and ideas have brought us to where we are now. I want to introduce to you Dee Johnson. He is going to be our co-host, and also we have Agnes, who is also going to be working here, and she has a lot of questions. She's been telling me
Yeah.
for weeks.
Mm-hmm. I do.
And we also have Beth, and she will also be discussing with us these things and also asking some questions as well. If you who are watching have any questions, please just write them in the comment section. If you have a comment to give, please write it there too. We are watching and listening, and I'll be reading them off as well. And while you have the moments while you're watching, you can also subscribe to the Amplop Sweden channel because we will have more programs and more things like this in the future. So, uh, Dee, what would you like to start with?
Um, I would like to start with getting an idea of the people in here, how you all were taught about Black history, which is just American history.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I can start since I'm the youngest of us.
Sure.
When I grew up in the States, I got to learn a lot about it because I lived in DC. So we talked about it a lot because the population in DC are very mixed. Like you get to know a lot.
I grew up in DC.
Yeah, then you know how it is. It's in that sense, it's really good. But then I moved back here when I was younger, like I was 10, 11, nothing. Since then, nothing. And unfortunately, that's a fault in the Swedish system, obviously. But it's interesting then to know more about Black history. And I love that we have a Black History Month because I think it's a lot to know, even for Americans to know, because we somehow just forget about it. And we somehow don't bring that up at the same sense as we do with the Civil War and we do with every single person that is white. That is something. So I think the Generation C or our generation has, like the generations before have failed us to really inform us. That's why we need this, I guess. I don't know how it is for you guys, obviously.
I grew up in Boston. Boston's the deep north. Growing up knowing that, despite the fact that the quote unquote north is supposed to be more enlightened, segregation, Boston is like segregation central. And not really aware of that growing up, knowing about it, but not really understanding what that meant. So, yeah, what did we learn of Black history? I think it was only towards high school where we started, some of the teachers would teach other elements of literature more than history. I don't remember U.S. history. I think I asked this question of my own classmates, and they confirmed kind of what I remembered. Not a lot, but not entirely absent either. But not a lot is basically absent.
Yeah.
So Massachusetts has been celebrating Martin Luther King Day since I was in school, whereas we didn't realize the rest of the country didn't recognize Martin Luther King Day. And that in fact it became a contentious point of a lot of states saying we're not going to recognize it.
Arizona.
Right?
Yep.
So, I mean, I have this contradictory sort of experience where we're supposed to be the people who were enlightened and open-minded, and
Yes.
Massachusetts is such a blue state, it's supposed to be so liberal, and yet the segregation of Greater Boston is literally street by street. I mean, it was that segregated. I have found out that it is less today. I think you guys all know Lisa I want to say Bernays every time I think of her name. You know who I'm talking about?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, she's I don't know where she originates from in the US, but she said, oh yeah, I lived in Boston for like 10 years. And I asked her, oh, well, where'd you live? And she said, South Boston. And I just looked at her because she's Black. I went, what? Like, how? Just out of high school, a friend of mine moved to South Boston, and she told me, yeah, it's changing here, but it's not, like, my Black friends can't come freely through here. She lived like right on the edge of it. She'd tell me that, yeah, I got Black friends that come over, but they definitely can't stay over. And they definitely can't go, like, they definitely just can't go into like downtown South Boston. And I was like, what? And so when Lisa said, yeah, I lived in South Boston, I was like, okay, that's a different Boston that I grew up with. Like, obviously things are changing, but that's how segregated it was when I was growing up. I mean, it really was. A friend of mine lived in Dorchester. Now, Dorchester is also kind of segregated. It is a mix of Irish and Black. and it's to the street. So an Irish friend of mine my friend of mine was dating him. We'd go visit him and we'd come in however we came in. And his house was like 3 or 4 houses to the next main street.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd take his dog for a walk and he'd say, you can walk the dog up to that main street and back, but you can't cross the street. Because that was turf, and the Irish people on that side didn't go over to, I don't know what the other side was, but obviously if I was visiting somebody on that side, I wasn't supposed to go to the other side.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he
This is in the 80s, right?
this is in the late 80s.
The late 80s.
Late
Mhm.
80s, early 90s. It was just around 89 somewhere.
It was safer in Alabama.
Oh,
Yeah, no, it was quite literally, Black people did not go to South Boston, period.
Mhm.
And Roxbury, which is sort of the equivalent for Black America, it wasn't the same kind of risk, but it was definitely like perceived that way. When I was a kid, so I was 10, I went sailing. So one of the great things about Boston is a lot of municipal activities, and I learned how to sail just at the basin of the Charles River, which is just outside of downtown Boston, across the river from like MIT. And I made a friend, I forget her name, but she and I were friends, and she lived in Roxbury, and she's like, hey, come over and visit sometime. I said, sure, okay. So her family I said, well, I'm going to take the T, like the subway. And I forget what station it was. They said, but when you get to the station, you stay on the platform, don't come downstairs.
what?
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm 10, 11, 12, whatever age I was. And I'm like, all right. So I get to that station and I'm like, well, there's no way they can come up and get me because they'd have to go through the pay part, the turnstile. So I just went downstairs and waited downstairs for them. And I remember thinking like, you know, I'd been to Roxbury with my mother, and it wasn't anything that I freaked out about, but I realized like, oh, this is the first time I'm the only white person in this area.
Mm.
And I didn't think anything of it, didn't feel threatened. Nobody looked me I didn't feel any issues, but when they picked me up, mind you, this is a Black family.
Yeah.
They looked at me like, what are you doing down here? I'm like, waiting for you. Like, you shouldn't come down here. Like,
Boston sounds horrible. That's where Malcolm X was.
Well,
Malcolm X was in Roxbury.
The good news from Lisa is that it's not like that. She lived in South Boston, the same place where my friend said her Black friends would not be allowed to basically, like, if the town had heard that they were staying over, like, there could be trouble and that they couldn't really like go through the city. So it has changed. I don't know what exactly
it's still known
that
as
means.
very racist.
It still
I know
is.
a lot of traveling musicians and performers, and they say Boston is one of the most racist places they've ever been.
I have zero
And if you were doing that in the late 80s, it was safer in Chicago. It was safer in Alabama. It was safer in DC, Maryland area. I can't even imagine.
And it is. It's crazy.
And my town, what's interesting, like, you know, graduating 86, we had a Black guy and his family lived who went to school with us, and everybody loved Steve Moore. So there was
one Black guy.
Yeah. But but wait a minute. So the point I'm making is that, so what I want to come to this thing with is, I'm a product of my environment, right?
Of course. Everyone.
So in my head, we're all like open-minded, we're all progressive, we're all inclusive, we're all kind of supposed to be peace, love, and nobody is discriminated. Like not that nobody's discriminated. We realized that there was that problem, but we're supposed to be the good guys, right? We who think like this, we who want to be open-minded, we who want to not think of this as a problem, we think we're good guys at this point. So my experience, if you ask me, is like, my town didn't have a problem with Black people. And it sounds silly to say the one Black guy, because you're right.
Yeah.
But so here where I want to go fast forward, but all of us were like, you know, when Steve moved into the town, nobody was like, oh, there's a Black guy in the town. It never came around as an issue, and like suddenly we could befriend him. It was just He moved in and he was in our class and people got to know him and that was it. Like the Armenians, like the Greeks, like the Italians, like the Irish. It's an immigrant community.
Have you ever asked him later?
Unfortunately, he died, so I can't.
Oh.
But the the reason I want to bring up Steve is a friend of mine and I, and again, sort of the same mindset. We're supposed to be forward-thinking, open-minded. She ended up being a lesbian. Our Armenian friends all freaked out. They kind of all get used to it. So, everybody had their social issues that they had to kind of deal with. She said she met somebody. This is now a couple of, say 10 years ago, a Black guy, wherever she was, wherever they were. And he's like, oh, you're from Watertown? And she goes, yeah, that's where I grew up. And he goes, my people ain't welcome there.
Whoa.
And she was like, what are you talking about? Like, why? Yeah. She goes, he's like, have you noticed there's like no Black people in Watertown? And she goes, we all think of Steve Moore, of course, but we're all like, she's like, oh, yeah. Because there's Latinos who have moved in, there are Asians who have moved in, but no, Black people have not moved into Watertown. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have an answer, but we had this conversation where she said, yep, he was like, my people aren't welcome there. And I don't know. I mean, I didn't have that conversation. So yeah. I don't know what this particular guy felt that made it clear to him.
We know.
Well, how?
Easy. I lived in white neighborhoods when I lived in the suburbs of Chicago. Mm-hmm. As a teenager, and I moved there when I was 15, and I lived there until I finished high school. I got followed by police when I was on my bike. They'd ask me if it was my bike, and I went to school at a private Seventh-day Adventist school in Hinsdale. Hinsdale is a really well-to-do area. Think 90210s.
Okay, yeah.
And suburban Chicago area. If you think of Home Alone, that's the area that Home Alone was filmed in. And so I got pulled over by the police with sirens on my bike to ask me if my bike was mine, or I guess I stole it from someone. And it's constant. You get followed in the malls. You get, my neighbors who were really cool, where we moved to this brand new subdivision. Like we waited for our townhouse to be built, and our neighbors would actually walk out sometimes when I was driving my little 1979 VW Rabbit home, because police would follow me, and they'd be like, what are you doing, to the police.
Okay, yeah.
And so what you get, and this is the thing that I didn't realize until I became an adult, there's two things to it, and specifically Jermaine and I are unique in this because I was raised by my grandparents who were about the same age, because she was the baby in her family. So I was raised by people who spent the majority of their adult life in Jim Crow. And those people told me, like, these things will happen. You just got to keep your mouth closed. You're not supposed to really tell white people what you're experiencing. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of conveyed from my parents' generation to everyone else. So I didn't really say much. I would say once in a while that I got called the N-word at school by an adult man who pushed me into like a chute. Now, if I had fallen in, I would have dropped 16 feet into broken glass. And when I fought him off and I told the school about this at the work that I was at, the school was like, well, it's just a word and all this kind of stuff. So what we were like subtly told is to keep it to ourselves. And I talk to my friends to this day. I'm 45. I talk to my friends to this day who remember when I bring it up, the security guards at the mall follow me around and all these things, but they don't piece it together because we were also taught to be quiet about being in these spaces. So Steve may have lived in hell, but he's not going to really tell you because he doesn't know who's safe to tell. Because you tell the wrong person, and now you live in 10 times the hell. And then when we're talking to our parents and our grandparents, they lived in real hell. So they think our stuff, they're dismissive of our experiences. And you see it, like, if you were to look at this as a grand cultural thing, you see it in hip hop. Hip hop was created because we had to teach each other, because our parents, what are you going to say to people who grew up in Jim Crow? You know, oh, you know, my teacher is this. Oh, you mean white teacher? Will you sit there with white kids? You know,
Yeah.
they weren't listening to
Let
us.
me interrupt you
Yeah.
a second just to clarify that
Mhm.
I can't ask Steve because I said I don't know how he died.
I know.
But
Yeah.
the other guy that my friend met hadn't lived in Watertown.
But that is also spread amongst us.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
know, right? The entirety of the Black experience in America since 1619 has been safety. And this is where people have a misconstrued concept as to what people were doing. It was always resistance. It was always resistance. The way that we talk, the duality and the way that we could turn on something and turn it back off, that was from the beginning of time. The thing that we did, and this is something that Jermaine can speak of this or whatever, is that collectively people would say, don't go over there. You cannot trust them over there. And if you had like an older older Black woman come up to you and stop you before you're walking into an area, you listen to her because she didn't know you, but when she looked at you and told you what you should not do, she was telling you, watch out now because
Yeah.
these people are not trustworthy. And that's what we've lived with the entire time. It is constantly living with the concept that anything can be snatched away from you. And the reason why we started with asking you all what you all learned is the part that people don't understand is we suffer in silence to this day.
Of course.
I'm the exact generation that the Clintons and Bidens and Black leaders who marched with Dr. King turned on us and said we were violent, said that it's okay to over police us. And I had so many police officers, and mind you, I'm more Theo Huxtable than I am any kind of, like, I didn't grow up in the hood. In fact, when I was around dudes that lived in the hood, I just paid attention to them because they could see things I couldn't see and all this type of stuff. But I was treated the exact same way. And so the initial thing for anyone born in the 20th century was get your education and teach your children how to speak correctly. And the whole thing was that if you are doing the right thing and if you are speaking correctly, you will be safe. The truth is, you are not safe. And the second I hit my growth spurt when I was 15, I grew a foot in one summer. I'm 6'4" or 195 centimeters. The second I hit my growth spurt, I went from being a kid to being treated like an adult. And the little things where you get slapped on your wrist and my friends that get slapped on their wrists, they pull guns on me. I figured out by the time I was like 15, 16, I had to be 10 times better than the white kids around me. I went to a boarding academy and I was always on my own. We had one Black faculty member there, so I had no protection, and he hated himself. So I had no protection. And they kicked out systematically every Black kid in my school over the course of the 2 years that I was at this boarding academy. So and to go further, our parents' generation also didn't give us that great of information either, because I don't know if you know, but that generation before us, my dad was born in 1938. They don't talk. They don't really tell you.
Yeah.
The version we had. And this is actually part of the Black experience that most people don't understand, is the version we had is Martin Luther King had a dream. Martin Luther King was a godlike Jesus figure. We could never live up to the greatness of Dr. King. And then they just skip over a whole bunch of stuff. We weren't taught about his anti-Vietnam stuff. We weren't taught about any of these things. And these are people, I mean, any teacher I had in school, literally, it was closer than 9/11 is to what we are right now. I remember 9/11 the whole day. There's no way a teacher could talk to my kids and say false information, and I wouldn't be like, no, that's not what happened. I would tell them what happened that day. But they collectively created an idea that it took us a long time, because I used to think, Dr. King was weak. I was all about that Malcolm X stuff because I only knew Dr. King, the Dream, and I knew people who knew Dr. King. And it wasn't until I got older and started reading about it And Jermaine, you can speak on this as well. Even the
Mhm.
Black Panthers. The Black Panthers were seen in the early 80s as like a failed thing.
Yeah.
Instead of saying what they actually did, fed children every single day, not on
Oh.
Thanksgiving, not on Christmas. They did it
Every single
every
day.
single day. They used a platform and they followed the platform. And if white cops came there with guns out, they pulled their guns
They
out.
pulled their guns
You
out.
know, and one of the things about Black Americans that people miss, and I always explain this to Swedes, we are not immigrants.
No.
We're not immigrants in any way, shape, or form. In fact, majority of white people that live in the United States are people who came in that mid 1800s. And so every single person, like look at Jermaine, you look at me, we can trace ourselves back to the 1700s at the latest. So we are the only people in America that are any different than us are Native Americans who are the actual Americans.
Yep.
But white Americans, the overwhelming majority of them are like when the Swedes came, 1/3 of the population that came. And what Europe doesn't take into consideration is that Europe helped facilitate this the entire time. It is a part of it. There is no way that Swedes, and in the Swedish education that you got, it's a lie. There's no way.
Yeah.
When 1/3 of the population, and my great grandmother was actually Swedish. When she came over there, 1/3 of the population came over. So who do you think they were writing letters to? If you move in 1860 to the United States and you're writing to Ursvik, you know, they're going to ask you, what are slaves like? And you have to pull the line. So it's like, oh, slaves like being slaves. And so it's been injected into Sweden since the inception of the United States, which Sweden was the first country to recognize the United States as separate from Britain. It got the best cotton prices on earth for doing that. And so none of these things are, we were just minding our own business. Even the concept of the Swedes where they move over to the Midwest is a lie. You don't move to Minnesota and all these places without noticing that there are people who actually live there that already have an agreement with the United States federal government that this is their land.
Yeah.
You have to help kill them off. And so, you know, this whole thing, and Europeans get on my nerves with this because it's always over there. America is an amalgamation of Europe. It is an extension of Europe. Every single thing from slavery on to the Jim Crow laws, Europe actively participated in. Because Sweden will sit there and talk about Ericsson and all this kind of stuff. But what they don't talk about is how they didn't sanction the United States, where people, our parents and grandparents, couldn't legally freaking vote until 1965, 10 years before I was born. America's always been a lie and Europe has always been a lie. And we have to actually start to do that. And I think the thing that I like about this summer, but I also don't, I mean, my honest opinion is I have very little faith in white people. No offense.
It's fine. It's fine.
No, but 400 years of, hey, buddy, we like to be treated fairly.
Of course. Yes, of course.
Yeah, and nothing else.
Because
I think the thing about this summer is the opportunity to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I have to raise my kids here in Sweden different than Swedes get to raise their kids.
Yes.
That's not fair. I'm tired of me taking on extra stress. My self-control could kill off every single person here when it comes to how much I can take with stress and not respond. But that's going to cost me in the long term. That's going to come with high blood pressure and all the other issues that come with taking in a ridiculous amount of stress. And so I think what we need to get to is just tell the truth. And my last part is that white people need to also understand that living in a lie hurts you more than it hurts me. At least Jermaine and I get to walk around and know how things work. You all are walking around where everything tells you you're special. You deserve the most. And then you get depressed and try to kill yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's okay. Well, no, what? Yeah, because I grew up. My growth was more so in the 70s, but I remember at fourth grade was when they started integrating.
Mhm.
And I was bused to an area that was about, at least by school bus, about 45, 50-minute bus ride. So I had to get up maybe an hour earlier than I would have normally had to get up to go to my regular school and travel that far. And it was the first time. And, and I'm not traveling to a school that was all white. I'm sure outside probably didn't phase me at all, because to me, I'm from fourth grade. They were just a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
But the whole concept of being taken out of your area, and you're not the only one, you're in a bus full of other kids being taken out of
Yeah.
their area and kind of dumped into another area to get their education. So it's almost like dumping, like, 10, 12 or 13 or 30, 40 kids, in an area they have no idea about, with people they have no idea about, not knowing how actually to get home if something happens, even though you're just in fourth grade, and you have to endure. um I know the stuff that I had to go through was, it's, as a girl, were a lot of mental stuff, that I had to deal with. I had to deal with the fact that I was dark skinned, and the lighter skinned black girls got to play with the white chicks. And because I was too dark, even the light skinned black girls didn't want to play with me, because I was too dark and I didn't have the right hair and I didn't have this or I didn't have that, and then I had to deal with the fact that, I might have had a bunch of white friends, and having the black kids be mad at me because I have white friends, because I should have black friends. And then you have black kids who just couldn't cross that barrier. They just did not want to be in this particular situation,
You all should
and
get reparations for what you went through. I mean, no, but
Yeah.
but the flaw with that concept
Mm,
is that we are going to civilize these black people by sending them to the white schools, which in
mm,
turn meant that the tax money that would have gone to your school
exactly.
down the street
Hmm.
was robbed from you. To top it
Yeah.
off, these
Yeah.
kids get an extra 2 hours of sleep every
Hmm.
day that you don't get to have.
Hmm.
And the teachers are not prepared for dealing with the type of complex problems. If you
No.
had put white kids at your school and
That's
made them
that's
integrate, that in itself would have been better, because black people know how to have empathy towards the people
Hmm.
that are there. And you best believe if your teacher said, do not call him that again, the
from
whole school would have been like, yeah, well, we're not doing
what I
that.
remember from busing, and tell me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong in your situation, at least in Boston, busing was in two directions. So if there was black kids coming from Roxbury going to South Boston, there were white kids from South Boston getting bused to Roxbury.
Getting treated like human beings when they got to the black school.
I
But the
don't know.
majority of
I mean, that was the
no, but
70s. So
no,
for
I
me,
understand. But the
I don't know.
majority of those kids were black kids being taken to the
Yeah.
better funded schools,
Hmm.
because that was their whole idea. Give
Yeah.
them the opportunity for an
Yeah,
education.
but I'm wondering. So is that's how I understand it. So Jermaine, in your case,
Hmm.
were the white kids getting on a bus going in the other direction same time you were?
Oh yeah, there were other schools that were going in the other direction, of
Okay.
course. I mean,
Okay.
I when I wasn't a part of that. My experience is in this little ball, and that is from fourth grade all the way up until college. I mean, from junior high to high school. So that kind of stuff. It's a battle to have to go through it, and like I said, it's not just, it wasn't just the mental battle. It's also the racial battle. Between, and going into junior high,
Hmm.
going into high school, and the same things with colors, and and not being light enough, and why are you in my neighborhood, and blah 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 blah, and this and that, being spit on, being kicked, being, those things are there. Those things were there, and they were, and a majority of the time it was happening because and literally because I was black and they didn't want me there. Period. I was
It's,
black. They didn't want me there.
mhm.
I
And
can't
and
find
the thousands of other kids that were there, they just didn't want there. And that was a huge problem that me, as and from 9 to 16, had to deal with.
Yeah.
And as much guidance as my mom tried to give, and because my mom was up in the schools, she
Mhm.
had no fear, because in her lifetime, she was born in 26 in Florida. She's had a gun put up into her head just for sitting and almost getting ready to open her mouth in a store. She's had those situations happen where she's like, Now my daughter is going into this area. I'm going to be in this area. So everyone knows that this is my daughter,
Yeah.
and she continued to do that all along school. Did it save me? Of course not. It didn't save me from a lot of things. I still had to go through the experience I had to experience up into high school, up into college. And did it round me? Sure. Did it wound me? Heck yeah. Am I able to deal with it? All I can say is I'm still here,
Mhm.
but the basis of all of that is the fact that, just like Dee said, we you get to a place where you have to literally bring yourself to a point of sucking in all of your inner emotion and feeling to deal with the situation in front of you, to deal with the fact that you are by yourself, surrounded by an environment of people who don't want you around.
Yeah.
How are you going to deal with this as a child, as a teenager?
Yep.
You're not supposed to.
No.
No, but it
But we were
happened.
also,
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
It happened
we also
all
we had
during.
parents that we couldn't really tell these things
Yeah.
to,
Mhm.
because even though they had your back, you kind
It
of
was
knew
all-
their story.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it was just like, mine's a little bit less. I mean, but I had girls that be like in high school, but like, oh, we can mess around after school, but I can't be your girlfriend because my parents can't have a black guy there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
crazy.
they would act like they were hooking me up. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, it was like, no, thank you.
Yeah, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
But these nicks and cuts, I think moving here, it exposed a lot of these things, because the thing about Sweden is that it uses ignorance as a way to be racist. Um, but what it ends up doing is going outside of the boundaries of what I could have pictured in Chicago. In fact, of all the places I lived, Chicago was the most racist place
Mm-hmm.
I ever experienced in my life. I hated that thing for years after I left. And finally started to accept it and understand like what Chicago went through. Chicago was literally state funded segregation. They built a highway to separate the black neighborhood and allow
Yeah.
the suburban people to pass it, thus cutting off financial development. The Dan Ryan Expressway, all this stuff cuts it off, the south side of Chicago, so that they were left in perpetual underdevelopment. And so I moved there from Maryland, D.C., where I went to, could go to Howard and hang out
Yeah.
and see all kinds of stuff. And so I'd never experienced this type of thing. In Alabama, I think the thing that people miss about the South is that because it had a spotlight on it, there were just things that you didn't have to worry about in the South. Like even if you knew people's background, they
Yeah.
still were cordial to you. And the thing I love about the South is they say what they gotta say. They're
Mm-hmm.
not disrespectful. They're not going to scream at you, but they say what they got to say, and you know where people stand. And so when I moved to Chicago, that was the worst experience. And to this day, I watch the people who sat in my class who vote for Trump and talk about, black people wanting to get free hands out and all that kind of crap. So I know that it was a failed experiment, even, and a waste of my time, even when I was there. But I think that that people like you, and I was just going to point out, we have a living legend here, a historical figure who lives in Sweden, and she was a part of the
Little Rock
Little
Nine.
Rock,
Yeah.
Little
Little
Rock
Rock
Nine.
Nine.
Yeah.
And I've seen her speak here, and it infuriates me to listen what she went through. She doesn't even watch the video
No.
of her stuff.
No.
From that time period. I mean, like, you would assume that by this time it's just a part of her life, no big deal. She turns away, and you can see the pain that she went through
Yes.
with this. When I watch the Little Rock Nine or Ruby Bridges, a 6-year-old, as a parent, I'm going to kill all those people, and they're still walking
Yes.
around right now. And so I think that the people that went through integration and were forced to if you're here and around white people to make it better for you, they should get some type of financial compensation. because everybody else gets financial compensation for stuff, and
Yeah.
what you went through makes you a living piece of history.
Mhm. Beth, go ahead.
Have you guys heard of it's a podcast series called Nice White Parents?
Yep.
Have you listened to it or
Yep.
know the storyline? So
New York Times.
yeah, so the New York Times. So it basically looks at a school system. The reason I think of that when you're talking about busing, and what I thought was really interesting from that podcast was what I got mostly from it was people saying, we don't need your integration. We just want to have our communities be equal. So don't try to like say, oh, poor people in those communities, let's bring you to these other communities where it's better. Like, no, we're actually kind of happy in our communities. Stop trying to make it into something you think we're supposed to want when we just want not to be shortchanged and harassed and all those other things. It was quite eye-opening for me because I think what's important, I don't know who's listening right now, but Jermaine, you and I have had this conversation about the fact that when you're on the other side, I'm not Black, we don't know how to ask. We don't know what to think. We don't know, are we being assholes or are we being nice people? And when we're fed, and I'm going back to this too, like when we're fed a bunch of information, right or wrong that we're fed this, but we are fed this, when we think like, oh, this is a fact, and then we try to like do something good from it, and somebody goes, you're an idiot, that's racist and that's wrong, and then you're like, you stand there with proverbially, your dick in your hand, like, okay, I think I'm trying to do something good, and I've been just told that I'm just contributing to the problem. And then you're stuck there with, but then what do I do? What can I do? And that podcast was interesting because it opens up this idea of people saying, don't try to solve our problems, just let us have our communities the way we like them. And that, for me, again, I keep thinking I'm a good guy because I keep wanting to be a good guy, but I keep finding out how stupid I am. It's how do people like me continue to sort of peel back, open up, learn from what, has been banged into our heads from forever without feeling like we're contributing to the problem by asking the questions.
Yeah, but the thing is, you have to ask the question because a lot of times, just like what you said, someone does something. Well, I think this is good. I'm going to do this instead of asking first, is this a good thing to do? Is this something that's going to be beneficial? They feel it might be beneficial, but then is when you should think about, well, let me talk to some people. Let me ask some questions.
So let me put myself out there as as this potential, tell me I'm wrong, and because I'm gonna, when rightfully, so I'm not saying anybody's wrong telling me these things. So it's all right, but here's this contradiction. Like, so I'm like, hey, teach me stuff. And people are like, that's not my responsibility, that's your responsibility. You're right, it's my responsibility. I'm going to own that. So I want to learn. If I don't know where to ask, if I don't feel safe asking, because I'm going to be told, don't ask me, do it yourself. And rightfully so. Black people are like, we're tired of telling you what to do. We're tired of doing this. Like, for God's sakes, take it yourself. So I get that. I really do. We're stuck in this, like, I want to do the right thing. I want to learn, but I know if I open my mouth, I'm going to probably stick my foot in it.
You're going to say the wrong thing.
I'm going to say the wrong thing unintentionally. It's a product. It's my responsibility. It's not anybody else's. But if I'm willing, able, and I think I'm one of those people who's supposed to be the good guys, like, how are the other guys supposed to, like, how do we do it? Like, this is what we're supposed to, I mean, that's why we're here, right? It's Jermaine, you and I joked about this. Like, this is for the white people to ask the questions, because this is the time that they need to get the answers. So this is that safe space. But without a safe space like this, there's a
Well, my thing is, especially, you know, and I mean, I am totally like, yes, you know, I don't want a billion people saying, teach me. No, that's because no, that is not my responsibility to do. I have access to the same amount of materials that you have, and you probably have even more access to that. And if those questions come up, you should be able to go and access that information before coming to me, as if I am the knowledge of Black history of from the 1400s to now. That is the issue, because a lot of times there are a lot of people even now, even last year, I heard so many times, well, slavery was over. Why are they still bringing this up? Well, slavery is over. And I would have to say, how old are you? You know, and they thought I was being insulting. I said, no. I said, not really. I said, not being insulting, but I'm literally asking how old you are, or how old are your parents? You know, and they'll tell me, you know, they're probably like 40 something. Their parents are probably 60 something. And I said, that's when we're talking about. We're not talking about any time beyond that. We're talking about in the last 30, 40 years, we're talking here. We're not talking about something that just happened a bunch of times and then it stopped, because it hasn't stopped. It's just gone through different degrees. All of it is just different degrees of stuff. And I think a lot of times they don't see that. You're not looking for that. You're just seeing this particular ball of situation, and then it kind of pizzled out. And then you felt, I don't have to pay attention to that, and not you, but just, you know, I don't gotta pay attention to that anymore. And all of a sudden, when it blossoms up every now and then, you think, oh, it's coming back again. Oh, why is this coming? It never left.
Oh, but that's easy to talk about those people and say, you know, hey, they're, you know, not doing their job. That's easy. But like me now, you guys all know me.
But I'm not saying you don't know your job.
I want you to use me. I want you to, like, because you know, it's easy to criticize the other people that aren't doing something. I'm trying. And I'm not getting it all the time. I have humongous, like, and I'm constantly trying. I'm constantly learning stuff that goes, like, you know, listen to that podcast or reading cast or learning about the Great Migration. I'm doing that. I'm doing that all the time. And I'm still going to put my foot in my mouth.
Okay, well, right now, ask me a question. One question.
See, I don't have a question. Well, like, what would be my question? My question would be like, Jermaine, how can I not feel like an asshole when I say something that I mean without any negative intention, but I put my foot in my mouth? How can I protect myself from or like, how can I justify saying, okay, that was stupid, I want to learn more, without somebody just going, you're racist, you're an asshole. And they're not wrong, but I don't want to be. So where is that halfway? Like, because, all right, I want to put myself out there and expose my ignorance, but I don't want to get slammed for it, because I'm trying to learn at the same time.
But here's the thing that I'll respond to that. The thing about white supremacy is it's always about you.
Yeah.
And so when you're speaking right now, you're asking, how do I ask questions without my feelings being hurt? You're also forgetting, but listen, you're also forgetting that you're speaking to people who live under constant duress. Now, you've read the stuff about the fact that I'm at war with my son's school because he's been called the N-word multiple times. I have to parent harder than you. I promise you I have to parent harder than you.
I believe it.
I have to parent harder because I have a teenage daughter who's mixed, and I have to keep it balanced with her because she's starting to become an idealized, pretty mixed girl. And I have to do this all on my own. I have to do this while my employment situation is held against the fact that I got this skin on me and I'm just cursed enough to be an intelligent Black man. I have to deal with all of these running problems all of the time, right? When you come to someone, when you've had access to information, when you are asking for their thing, and last year was hellish because I got so many people. What should I read? What should I do? What should I do this? What should I do that? I read because it kept me from hating every single white person on the planet. I read because I wanted to feel sane when I walked down the street. So I've been doing this work since 1987, 86. You know, like I did this for sanity. And the thing at the end of the day is like your personal feelings, you got to toughen up. Just like Jermaine got to toughen up when
I'm
people,
not worried about
let me
being
see your hair,
criticized.
and people want to but that's what I'm
No,
saying.
but
It's like,
that's the issue
allow
of it.
people.
But so here's okay. So let me go. Let me say
Allow empathy in the response to the way that they respond.
Let me go
like we just
constructive on
told
this.
you, we were not allowed to actually show white people or any non-Black people the frustration that we had growing up. When she was bused to school, when I was getting followed by cars, by police officers, we were not allowed to do that. So
No,
what
and
you
I
should look at
respect
those
that, and
responses as, but those responses should be looked at as finally people are able to speak their truth. And being irritated that people are hopping
I'm
on
not
in
irritated.
2020, 2021.
I'm
It's
trying to
enough.
go.
Is
I'm
a
trying to go
thing.
constructive. I'm trying to go constructive
I am
because it's
too.
like
I'm explaining that to you.
yeah, and I'm not bothered by the fact that people are pissed off at me.
Mm.
The question is, how do I turn it from see, you don't get it, and you should be doing all these other things instead of what you're doing. It's like, I'm trying. So can we get past what I'm supposed to be doing and what should I be doing? Like
what Jermaine said,
when I'm
you have
like,
access to information already.
right.
There's no reason for you to be in first grade when we are here with PhDs and you're asking us.
No, but I got to go through
questions.
the grade school thing. So maybe that's a good point, calling me first grader in this case, because that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And if my kid in first grade doesn't know how to read a book, I go, okay, we're going to put you on the right track to reading the book. Here's what you need to do. So if you make that parallel and I say, I'm trying to educate myself from first grade up, you had the living experience, you had the background knowledge, you had the experience. I'm trying to homeschool myself right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I'm trying to find out is along this path, because I'm in second grade or third grade and not in college, because you're more educated in this by 1,000-fold than I am. You have the PhD in this, and I'm in grade school. Is how do we take into consideration that as long as somebody's willing to be in grade school, they got to be given the books too, and they've got to be taught like a kid in first grade.
The thing about it is that it's different when a literal 6-year-old has to learn, opposed to when a 36-year-old who has the touches.
I'm a little older than 36.
Look, we're gonna settle with 36. It's a nice age. That's in the middle. When you have someone who's 36, who still has these experiences, but because of their skin color, they didn't have to actually go through those experiences that I had to go through. But
all right, let me go to college with like a Shakespearean expert, because I had the same problem, not understanding and having to go through the education process.
You're still making it you-centric. Yeah. You're forgetting that what we are telling you is that you aren't the only person asking the question. You're one of hundreds of people asking for us to teach them, which is offensive when you are still taking the brute force of racism on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Today,
and I'm trying, but I'm trying, right? So here's the question: when I show my ignorance, what is the right response I should expect from if I use the analogy of like the Shakespearean class, I was in like a Shakespeare 101 class, and I'm thinking like, all right, I'm supposed to be learning like it was an introductory to Shakespeare. And in the first class, because my professor was some Shakespearean guru, like all his like graduate students were in the class too. And I was like all psyched because I had actually read, whatever that play was for that day, like the intro play of whatever, the easiest Shakespeare play. And I'm like ready for a Shakespeare play, like first day. And they're like, oh, when you compare to Othello. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to have this conversation? I can't talk about Othello. I read the first play in the intro class. I talked to the professor and I said, look, you want me, because he's like, you didn't participate enough. I said, I couldn't participate because I couldn't open my mouth and compare and like compete with the people that knew about Othello. It was an intro class. So I don't expect those people to have to teach me Shakespeare. But when I want to talk about, A Midsummer Night's Dream and not be looked at, well, don't you know how that compares to Othello? I'd be like, no, I don't know how that looks to Othello. I haven't read Othello yet. I'm getting to it, but I got to get there first. I can't get to Othello without going through the plays. And if I have to understand the first one, you can't be criticizing, or not you. This is not I'm worried about how I'm doing it, but like a learning experience in general for people. Because I'm going to take it fine. But other people are not going to take it fine because they're like, I'm trying, right? I'm trying. I'm reading the plays, but I can't get to 27 plays today. I have to do it one by one.
The thing about it is that, like you just said, if you have a bunch of not just, when you have someone coming at you with, I need to know how to be compassionate to you. I need to know this is literally what's being said. I've been doing a lot of stuff, but now you need to teach me how to be compassionate to you. And that's not something that I should have to teach you. Either you're going to have that compassion.
Me feel safe. While making me feel safe.
Yes.
I'll take that.
Wait, listen. And that's one part of it. Having the and then, because if I came to you, here's an example. Okay, that's very morbid, but I'm gonna,
do it.
Say, you had a pet that died, and you were really, really close to this pet, and your friends knew about this pet, but they knew, you were like, blood close, heart pounding. This was your baby. And they come to you and you're like, oh, why are you so sad? Oh, my dog, someone's passed me. Oh, that's so sad. How did it happen? When you start to because you're thinking, oh, this person wants to know this. So you start telling them, this is what happened. And this is how I felt about it. And blah, 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 on and on and on. And then they go, these are the two responses that happen. They either, oh, okay. And they walk away. Mm-hmm. Now what happened? Now what has happened? You've given this information to them that they've wanted, and then they're done with you while they have now opened up a terrible wound in you. Or they debate you. Really? Well, that dog was pretty old, so, it was probably time to go. You don't want to hear that shit. Excuse me. Sorry. You don't want to hear that crap. And these are the two fights. These are the two fights that you have when you come to somebody and say, well, I want to know how to be compassionate to you in this regard, because I learned a little before, but then it went away. But now it's coming up again. So now I'm going to ask you, how do I do that? What do I have to, what do I have to look at to do that? What do I have to read to do that? And that's like me coming to you saying, I know nothing about being Filipino. Tell me what I have to do to learn about being a Filipino, to learn about this. What about your mom? What about your dad? Blah, 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 blah. Even though it's almost on the same wavelength, it's a different feeling for you because I'm asking you about your heritage and your this and your that. And that's a huge thing for you. But and I'm talking about family-wise. For me, when people come to me, they don't want just my family. They're not asking about my mom or my daddy. They're asking about my whole history of being a Black person and what they can do, what they can do to get more to get even more information so they can, behave properly or behave the right way. And a lot of times it's not a point of being right or wrong. A lot of it is compassion.
Yeah.
A lot of it is stemmed on compassion and what you can do on your own. Because if you had someone who was coming to you like that, you'd want them to have some idea of what to do in order to learn more about you, in order to learn about your suffering or your pain, or if you and your dog died, the type of dog you had. Oh, that was so sad, blah 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 blah. That we don't have that. What is that word? We don't. I don't know the word. No, not the compassion, but
Empathy.
yeah, no, not the right, but we don't. I can't.
Entitlement?
Huh?
Entitlement?
No, not even entitlement. We just we don't have that privilege
Privilege.
to
No.
to to say, oh well, why didn't you do that before, and why didn't you do it? We as Black people have to even be on a fine line when it
Yeah.
comes to trying to explain this. But like I said, people aren't asking just about my family. They're asking about my whole heritage and Blacks and what they have to read and what books they should look at. And it's like, it's a
Google.
library.
Yeah.
But
Google it.
Black
Yeah.
history section, because there's one,
Yeah.
and sometimes you learn a lot by just listening to those other people, just
And
not even
humble
saying
yourself.
anything, by
And
just
humble yourself.
listening
Make
and
it
just
not
getting
about you.
just getting pieces of it and saying, okay, I get it, I get it, I get it. I mean, last year, with everything that happened last year, with all the murders and with the Black Lives Matter, not even the movement, but the protests of people that were going through the street, and the authorities, that's what I'm going to call them, just being as incompassionate as they could possibly be
Mhm.
with all the situations that went on last year. Just being their trash selves, just as incompassionate they could possibly be, and having the authority behind them, where one should not really have to really jive with the other, and they do. You got to know their personal feelings. That no matter if they have that badge, this is how they feel. They're not trying to learn anything. So like I said, but like you say, when there is a bunch of people coming at you and they're saying, well, how am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to get this? Or how am I supposed to get that? A lot of times it's better to say, what did you go through? Put
But
it
then,
on the other person.
but then I
Ask the
want to
other person
ask.
about that.
Then I want to ask, how do you feel how has it become later on in life for you guys as we get to learn more? How do you feel about it? Do you feel like we're going forward, or do you feel like we're going not at all?
Oh, this is a backward motion. This is like this is just
It's
like
a treadmill.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just doing like this.
It gets cool for a second and then white people fall off.
Okay.
I mean, for me, where I am in life, I have a 11-year-old son and 13-year-old daughter.
Yes.
I wasn't prepared for them going through it similar or worse than what I went through. And I have very little patience anymore because I live in another country. I should have certain base things in 2021 that my children should not have to go through. And I'm built different. I'm built for this stuff. Like Jermaine said, we were raised by people who made us a certain way so that we could not only get over, but strive even under pressure. So I understand that I'm built for this way, but I don't want to give them this because it's a gift and a curse at the same time. Like I said, I will pay for this eventually. I don't want them to have that. And so when I watch my children have to go through these type of things, I lose a lot of patience with it. And I think about the fact that we are the only oppressed people. This is a very important thing for me to understand. We're the only oppressed people on the planet Earth that haven't blown up buses, that haven't actually led a violent resistance against their oppressors. We should be getting the Nobel Peace Prize every year because of the fact that we have never done it once. And as a collective thing. South Africa, they did it, you know, and then Mandela won the Nobel Peace Prize. They've done it in every single place. The Aborigines did, the Native Americans did it. You can go on and on and on and on. And they talk about Gandhi, but they don't talk about the fact that there was an actual armed resistance against the oppressors, which were the British. And so the concept that we are supposed to be everlasting Gandhi, Martin Luther King type figures, it gets tiresome after a while, because everything is predicated off the concept of waiting. And the part that people don't get is that Black Americans have always been the truest form of American. So American is pick up your gun and fight for your freedom. But when it comes to us, we can get people like Chairman Fred Hampton murdered by the state, the singular person to get set up and murdered by the state. And we're supposed to, we shall overcome, walk around holding hands and this, that, and the other. And as I sit there and I look at the situation with my children, I'm in another country where this poison is just as poisonous and potent as it is back home, but maybe even worse. I don't get treated like a human being for the stress that I go through.
No.
I know for a fact that the majority of white people going through my situation would be in a mental institution, off from work, getting 80% of their pay indefinitely. But people have this misconstrued concept that people like Jermaine and I, we're just used to struggle. and you get it from the people closest to you. Yeah, we're just magically built for just taking the whip, and we're gonna just keep living like this. And you know, when Jermaine and I talk, I always tell her, like, how are you doing? You know, not what you tell other people, how are you doing? Because other people are going to desensitize themselves to what struggle she's going through. And when I watch this and I look at the fact that my dad was born in Meridian, Mississippi in 1938, I look at my grandfather was born in Meridian, Mississippi in 1914, and my grandmother in 1917, and my other grandmothers are still alive. And I think about what their lives encapsulated. It has been a failure after a failure of a state that kept us out by redlining, that when my grandparents died, who worked harder than pretty much anyone I've ever seen, we did not get to reap the benefits of what they worked for. And this is what reparations is about. You know, redlining went all throughout the United States, from every coast, every section of the United States, and it robbed us of generational wealth. And there's a big, big difference, because I watch below average white people be able to pay for their kids going to school, give their kids $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 here and there. We're robbed out of all of that. And then even our physical appearance deteriorates the value of the houses that we live in. And that even happens here. We don't get approved for loans here because of the color of our skin. You know, and so when you think of this in a concept of, we're fighting for our children, we're fighting for our existence, we're fighting against the people that are closest to us to say, hey, I'm a normal human being. And then people mosey up to us on a regular basis, especially when it's in style. And they come up to us and they want us to answer their questions. They're like, yo, why don't you help me with my financial situation first, and then we can have it. Let's have a back and forth on this. But we don't even get that, because people assume that we're supposed to be able to deal with all this stress on our own.
And that's a fault in our system, I feel like.
Absolutely.
But it's
absolutely.
Also,
and it also hurts you all. I mean, you know, I always say, I use this example. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Majority of the movies that I watched as a kid and teenager were below average white dudes walking away with a model chick and driving away in an amazing car because they started broke and then they ended up at the top. And that's all they saw. So anybody my age saw this over and over and over again. Guess what happened when those dudes got 25, 30 years old? They were sad they didn't have a mansion and a model chick. And then you see that, and it twists into Proud Boys, and it twists into these white supremacist BS organizations where they start blaming everybody else because they don't have the model chick and they don't have the Rolls Royce and the mansion. And so what it does at the end of the day, and even the objectification of white women, that turns you all against yourselves. So you have eating disorders that don't exist at a high rate in the Black community. You have all of these things, and all the violence that was committed in your name. That is a generational trauma you all have to deal with. So racism isn't about us. It's about everybody collectively, because it's messing everybody's perspective of reality, except us, up. And it's allowing you to live in a world where you're sad because, well, I mean, I do have a job and I do have 2 healthy kids, but I don't have 2 summer houses because my friend has summer houses.
But we don't know how to appreciate it at the same as I guess you guys do. Because we
so that's the thing that you all should work on your own. And you all should look at the world. And there's a selfish way to look at the world, which I think is beneficial. And the beneficial way of looking at this world is like very simple. When you get old, do you want to live in a world that sucks, or do you want to live in a world that doesn't suck?
Yes.
Because the more we have equality, and we've had historical reasons behind this over and over. Once industrialization went, you know, when you're talking to your fellow Swedes who are talking about, oh, class-based things, or I could never be a doctor, I could never be a lawyer, that's only for rich people, and so on and so forth. It limits people who should be the people walking in the room when you're an 80-year-old. You know, it limits these things. And so what I look at it is equality in itself worldwide, not based off the arbitrary squiggly lines that make our countries, but equality worldwide means that we'll have more Einstein, Steve Jobs, and Ida B. Wells, and keep going. You know, we will have tons of those people that will improve our quality of life over and over and over again until the time that I'm an 80-year-old. I want to go out and play basketball when I'm 80 years old. And if we had enough people doing that, I'd probably be able to do it. And be like, oh, my knee hurt, no problem. Have you back out there in 5 minutes. And that's the thing that we're robbing ourselves of. I mean, when you look through history as women, you all should be able to easily see they didn't talk about y'all. According to the history we were taught in our books, it's just white dudes out there doing the greatest, and everybody else was just doing nothing.
Let me take a pause word right now and just bring in Jerry. How are you, Jerry? Because I know you've been listening all this time.
No, sorry.
It's okay.
Jerry's got his Christmas lights up.
Welcome.
Yeah, I know. I see the lighting thing in the back. That looks nice. That looks nice.
I mean, I can't really say anything. Like I got my Christmas flag given the red hue.
Oh my days.
But I want to know if you have anything that you'd want to comment on or question.
Yeah, no. First off, I think it's a super important subject, and I just wonder how do we get past it? You know, what are your thoughts on that?
How do we get past what? You got to give a specific.
Past just racism in general, just all the issues. I know, but I mean, I just. I don't know.
It's not. Well, you know, it kind of like not up to one. It's kind of up to all. Literally, it has to be a virus. It has to be. I mean, that's ultimately what it has. It's got to be a virus, and unfortunately, it's not. I don't think there'll ever be a point where it will be gone. I feel that I can talk like 6, 7, 8 years ago, or at least 6 years ago, 6 to 7 years ago, when people are moseying along and just going through their thing, that it wasn't as blatant, and meaning that, let me see, like in the South, like Dee had talked about, when, they're going to come and they're going to say exactly who they are and how they feel. And then, And for in my particular mind, I'm, in that realm, I think, okay, well, everyone's going to have their own prejudices. There are going to be tons of people aren't going to like me, and as some people I don't like. As long as I'm polite to them, I don't have to worry about any other thing. I can not like them. I cannot like their skin, their hair, as long as I'm decent, as long as I'm courteous, everything should be fine. And that's literally the kind of line that people led for quite a while, until they were given permission that they didn't have to do that anymore.
Mm.
And this is where
They weren't,
huh?
but they actually weren't. It was the state was allowing them to be able to do it because the state was telling people like me, and that is where you and I differ.
Mm-hmm.
Because of my age, the state was actually telling people like me, stay in your place. And
Oh no,
that's where
they were doing that as well. I'm talking. I'm
that's
not.
what
I'm just
saying.
talking
It
about on one
allowed
side.
you.
Yeah.
No, but it allowed white people to not be as cruel as their parents were.
Mm.
It allowed them to do that. But what they did is they used, that's why we talk about police brutality, because
Mhm.
it was not, our parents' generation level of calling us
No.
the N-word and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
That wasn't a part of it. But the police were the ones that took the place of the Ku Klux Klan, that took
Yeah.
the place of these things.
Yeah.
And then what they did in the 80s is they constantly talked about crack cocaine and that we were super violent people. The
Mhm.
first time I heard about Donald Trump was with the Central Park Five.
Mm-hmm.
Those boys were 14 and 15 years old. I was 14 years old. It terrified me that a rich dude could take out multiple ads in the newspaper talking about bringing back the death penalty on minors. But at the same time, Bill Clinton, Al Sharpton, all these people, Jesse Jackson, they were throwing my generation under the bus.
Yeah.
I used to see these people all the time, and I point this out. And so what we ended up doing is we ended up having no back from our parents' generation, and we were thrown under the bus by pastors, politicians, and everyone else. But what it allowed white people to go through is not blame anything on themselves, because they weren't horrible like their parents.
No.
They weren't not letting you and I come into the house and come on in, Jermaine. Yeah, it was no problem with that, because the state's strong arm was being used against us. And when we watched that in January 6th insurrection, the thing I kept thinking was like, how far would Jermaine and I get in
Make
DC?
it.
Yeah, how far would
No,
we
but
make it up the stairs?
you bring up a good
Make it
point,
across the
though.
line. Huh?
Yeah.
You bring up a good point about how everything's portrayed in the media.
Yeah.
I when I was in Kansas City, I had a friend who worked for the police department on the white side of town, because it really was, Kansas City is really there's like a very white side of town, there's a very black side of town, and there's this middle, where people, intermix a bit. And he said, he told me, he said that there's a lot of violence on the white side of town. Yep. Being a police officer there, he said, you just don't hear about it on the news.
Nope.
He said all the news does, they and it's true, because when you live in Kansas City, it's, shooting after shooting that happened, on the black side of town.
Yep.
You never hear about the white side of town.
Yeah.
No, and that's how they balloon it up and give that false sense of, ooh, I'm not going to go over there, which is what they did all the time. With any particular in all states, and even in New York. I mean, yes, the South Bronx was pretty rough, but not this craziness that they had depicted it to be. And then when they made the movie, it was just like marked Enemy X. The Bronx was no place to go. No one goes there, and then I had to work there with my crazy idyllic mind, and wander around. And for me to go to any area, I'm going in for whatever I'm going in for. I'm not thinking about all those preconceived notions. I can't. There's no use in doing that, because whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And unfortunately, a lot of people go into areas and go into all kinds of mindsets with the preconceived notions, with pre-learned things that they have seen on TV, that they have been told, that they have been taught by, parents, friends, this, that, and the other. They have all that sitting on their shoulders, and then they enter into a situation thinking all these things are going to happen, and either maybe one or two do, and they're like, I knew it was going to happen. I knew it. That whole place is just trash, or they go in looking for it.
Yep. To this day, I still hear the same thing when people go to New York. I accidentally got on the A train, didn't know that it was express train. It took me from 59th to 125th. But I got off and I was a little nervous, but I was able to walk around to the other side without getting robbed. And like, do you really think that people on 125th have never seen white people before?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Or even the fact
that is a perception that they
Yeah.
act like we are the savages, when in reality, the most savage people, in my opinion, are the people who stood at those lynchings and brought their children there to desensitize them to the violence against Black people. Those pictures are the creepiest pictures to me, because you see these whole families smiling while there's a burnt Black body hanging by his neck. I mean, like, just in a humanity concept, that's one of the most repulsive things I've ever. Medieval Europe didn't walk around smiling next to the heads on the pikes, but these people were able to do it, and they're still alive today. And so what it comes down to is this constant dehumanization of us. People want to give props to themselves, and that's the genius of racism. It's saying, I'm not the Ku Klux Klan. I don't say the N-word. I don't do this. These extreme things from the 50s and 40s. But what it doesn't realize is the same people that raised you, or you were around, were standing in those pictures where you were, without knowing it, desensitized to our Black bodies being in pain. The reason why all of those videos before, and the thing that creeped me out, and I really struggled when Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old child, was shot by the state. I really struggled when what's his name in Florida was killed by that piece of crap, and these are children, but that 12-year-old boy was doing 12-year-old boy things. He wasn't running around hurting anybody. He was in a park by himself. He's not scaring anybody. And they shot him the second they came out of the car. And what you heard with him, Mike Brown, and with and what's the other dude?
I have his face in my
yeah, me too. Yeah, in Florida, who was walking.
Michael?
No. The one in Florida with Zimmerman's idiot self.
Yes.
Good. So Tamir Rice.
Tamir.
No, not Tamir Rice.
No,
Rice
you just said that.
What's his name? Anyway.
Anyway.
The thing that you hear with these things is what they really are saying. And you heard this with Mike Brown. That guy got to be on 60 Minutes or whatever. And he said, well, when I was shooting him the first time, he got madder. It just got on his nerves, and he was more going to hurt me, so I had to shoot him more times.
Yeah.
What Marvel movie are you talking about? Do you know how that? But here's how that translates. I've been to the doctor here, and I had to get stitches on my thumb, and the dude looked me dead in the eye when I said, "Will it hurt?" And he was like, "No, it won't hurt for a big guy like you." What? Because I'm big? I magically am not connected to pain?
Yeah, exactly.
And it happens on a regular, everyday basis. So this mindset of him saying this insane stuff about shooting a 18-year-old kid who was walking toward him, who just finished high school.
Yeah.
And he's shooting him down. He said, every time I shot him, it made him angrier and stronger.
Yeah.
Trayvon Martin.
Tamir Rice, they were like,
Martin.
He was almost 6 feet tall, which he was not, and he was still 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what those things do is they desensitize you. So you don't need to be at the lynching, but you were taught that we have less pain than you.
Yes.
And that's the part that people need to start to take into consideration, like your friend in Kansas City said. So they omit the violence of whiteness. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not worried about a Muslim extremist any day of the week. I'm worried about a crazy white dude
Yes.
just walking up and shooting random people all the time. That's my biggest fear.
Yes.
They can get past security. They can get past the police. They're the ones that kill more people randomly than somebody who supposedly thinks he has a cause.
But then I have another question. How do you feel, since you have two perspectives from the United States and from Sweden, and since you talk about your kids that experience a lot of racism here, is it because we Swedes or because we don't have the same history?
So we don't have the same history.
Yeah, we do have the same history, but we do not have enlightened it as much, if we say it like that.
You just lie.
You just
yeah, exactly.
You just lie.
Yeah, but we lie to our kids in school, and we like.
Can I use this? Can I use this as an example? Yeah. Tell me what you learned in Sweden about World War II.
I learned about how the United States and how the British colonies won against Hitler in the longer run, while they were more dominant in the early runs. But we didn't learn about anything about Africa or how they controlled the African, North African parts and how they won that. Oh, we were neutral. We were neutral. Then you know about it now because my mom and dad teach me. But you would here in Sweden, you would say that we were neutral.
Do you know, I met the great-grandfather of my children. They never got to meet him. And we're up in northern Sweden. And I asked him, he was telling me he used to, I was like, what was World War II like for Swedes? And this is the first week I get to Sweden, so they're translating for me. And he was working on the Finnish border. And he would cut trees down. And so he was in a camp, a logger camp. And they would sit there eating their food and they would watch the German bombs drop on their neighbors, the Finns.
Yeah.
Right? And I asked him, were you afraid? And he was like, no. We knew we were helping the Nazis. So they wouldn't touch us. And do you know that was the first time that his granddaughter, the mother of my children, and his son had ever heard him speak of that?
Yeah, that's crazy.
The truth of the matter is that not only because you have to think of a collective thing. Like right now, we're going through a collective thing with the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Sweden really isn't going through the same collective thing as the rest of the world.
Oh, no.
You know, I mean, people would literally freak out if we brought anybody from the States and we're like, welcome to Sweden. They'd be like, why are people not wearing masks?
Yes,
this is creepy. I'm going to get back on the plane now.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. Yes.
So once again, Sweden is robbing itself of a collective memory of sorts, where they get the opportunity to be a part of the collective sense of good or bad or ugly or whatever. And that's what Sweden is. It lies to you all so it can lie to itself.
Yeah.
There's a reason why their great-grandfather had never mentioned, or they were never taught to ask, what World War II was like.
Yeah.
And I've asked, I'm obsessed with asking Swedes this now.
Yes.
I asked a friend of the family. She said she was sad because she was like a kid when the war was over, because it was very interesting to listen to what was happening in the war at night on the radio. And then when the war was over, she was sad. And I was like, were you sad because unlike other kids around the world, you didn't have to worry about your daddy dying?
Exactly. Yeah.
And she's like, I never thought about it like that, but
no,
that's probably it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel like we are collecting and lying to our younger generation, so we don't get to learn how to behave, because we are trying to, but to do more.
But to do more is to a point of just reading more. I mean,
exactly.
I've crossed tons of people who didn't realize that that Sweden was even a part of slavery. They were like, oh no, we weren't a part of that. We were neutral. I was like, no,
we weren't.
No. You're European and you're part of Europe, and I drive by those mines where you made the chains when I go to my summer house, a kind of feeling. And they were like, really? And I'm thinking to myself, okay.
Yeah,
You know,
you
there
give
is some paperwork here in these history books, and I said, you know, every search engine is available to you
yes,
to find this information out, as well as regarding with, especially like I said, with Black history and the wars, and just a lot of the, even with the turmoil between blacks and whites, even in the military, you know, because you're treated the black army better, you know, or no, not even better, treated them like regular folk.
yeah,
Yep.
There
equally,
was no separate white fountain. There was no, you know, there was no
yeah,
separate black fountain. You know, they were in the UK. They were military men, and that's all there were to it. And it was the white military men who got pissed off because they weren't treating them as they should have been treated in the
White
U.S.
American.
under
yeah,
the Jim Crow law that they had in the U.S.
mm-hmm.
And so then they did.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
so I
Mhm.
mean
Mm,
that it and everything, and just as Dee even talked about the fact of whites feeling that we are tougher and stronger and don't feel as much pain. That goes back to all those years
yes,
as slavery, and even with medicine, where they used the Tuskegee Airmen. I remember my mom was a nurse, training to be a nurse at that time, a surgical nurse. She was the one who told me about those experiments. A lot of that I didn't hear about. Of course not. I'm not going to hear about that in
mm-hmm.
school, you know.
Mhm.
And she had told me about it, and then she was like, no, there are these, you know, books, authors, and to the point where, yeah, I had to go into the library and I had to go find, you know, look it up, find it, and read about it, you know, and thinking that blacks were tougher, with more thick skin, we can
Yep.
take more, and you know,
Yeah,
and
Don't
literally
feel
kind
pain. They
yeah,
literally
literally,
said we don't have pain
yeah,
receptors.
of
yeah,
course they
our
And
do.
pain receptors are
this is
very,
actually
very low,
Swedish.
almost nothing,
Yeah,
This
you
is
know,
actually Swedish with phrenology.
you know,
mm,
That's where it came from.
mm,
Phrenology and eugenics were a Swedish thing.
yeah,
Yeah. So I think the thing is that what we need to get to is like, I'll use Dr. King as an example.
yeah,
Dr. King had a dream. He also was an evolving, I mean, he was 26 years old when he became famous during the Montgomery bus boycott, right? He
yeah,
was 26. Just like
26, yeah.
let that sink in. He was 26 years old when he initially burst onto the scene.
mm-hmm.
Dr. King had the dream in 1963, and he was dead by 1968 when he was 39. What we were taught and what you were taught about him was that he had a dream,
Mm-hmm.
and he also was like cool with Rosa Parks. That was pretty much all you were taught about him. We were taught that he was a godlike figure.
Yes,
The truth is, he had a dream to sleep with as many women as he could possibly sleep with. The FBI files got him having menage a trois and all kinds of crazy stuff, you know, the entire time. But then again, a human being
yes,
who has been targeted by the state since he was 26 may have some messed up stuff. It was
yes,
also the 50s and 60s where cheating on your wife was just it was a thing you did. It was a rite of
mm-hmm.
passage. But by not telling us that he was a flawed human being, or telling you, we could never experience living towards that level of excellence, because if you have flaws in you, then you're not allowed to be that great.
Yeah,
So if we tell the truth, whether it ends up being that your grandfather's a piece of crap,
yeah,
did crap stuff, we actually are able to live in a world that's based off of reality. So
mm-hmm.
even if you have quirks in your personality, and Beth has quirks in her personality, she doesn't have to be perfect in order to still achieve greatness.
Yes,
And this is a drawback of the Christian messianic concept of a person. Jesus just walked around being awesome all the time. And so we have that built into our cultures in Western culture. You have to be this perfect person all the time. And what that ends up doing is it puts an undue stress on us as Black people, because we don't show as our messiness like anyone else. We're aware people are watching us. That's a horrible way to
mm-hmm.
live. And it puts on you all that you know, the second that someone who had anything to do with Black Lives Matter makes a mistake or cheats on their wife, look at him. He's not really about the struggle. Yeah, you can be about the struggle and be sleeping on the
And be
couch with your
human.
wife.
Yes.
He's
Yeah.
mad
Be
at you.
normal.
You're human. And so that's what I would like to see with history moving forward. And I always talk to my kids about this because the drawback of being Black is that you look at slavery and Jim Crow and you think just sad people. But Jermaine and I wouldn't exist if it was just sad people
No.
walking around moping all the time. That is not the way that it actually is. And what I just give them this thing. There's a person that existed and they were slaves and they're going to die enslaved. That person loved you and I so much that they just felt like any little thing that I can do to push this forward, to make this end, even if I don't benefit from it, or my children don't benefit from it, or my grandchildren don't benefit from it, eventually there will be somebody who benefits from it. And that to me, which is called generational love, is one of the most beautiful things. You know, and in the same concept that my Swedish great great grandmother moved from here because Sweden was sucked and people were
Yeah.
starving. She just wanted to be able to live in a world where she could get opportunities. That's a beautiful thing to be able to see. And so by humanizing them, that they were happy, sad, they fell in love, they got mad at their spouse, and all these other things, and making them full human beings. That's the world we need to live in, and that's where I'm actually impressed with historians when it comes to this stuff now,
Mm.
because that's what I want to see.
And that would be, I mean, just in general, that would be a great, and also like even getting back to what with you, Beth, as saying, what can I do to help you? Help me, help you, help me, help you. That kind of thing is still on that similar, or on that same track of just come like we're doing now, coming out of that shell and asking certain questions, trying to answer them, or at least finding a way to get an answer. Even if it's not the answer, you at least have a basis of where you can get the answer from. There's been so many people have so many different objectives when asking someone who's Black about, well, what can I do, and blah 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 blah. Some have selfish objectives, some have altruistic. Yeah, very true. Yeah, what is the word?
Altruistic.
Thank
Altruistic.
you.
Yeah.
Altruistic. Ooh, and I lisped it. I don't know why I did that. Altruists. Yeah, what you said. Objectives to just to bring themselves forward, to broaden their knowledge, to allow things in. Because a lot of times people just want to hear stuff, but they're not taking it in. They're just listening to
I would
hear
say
it
that
and
probably
not
one
taking
of
it
the
in.
biggest messages that I want to tell people all the time, and I think
Mhm.
everybody should tell people all the time. You should be telling us this. Like you should tell me this, even though I'm like, I know this because I'm gonna advocate for it. But Jerry, when you asked about racism, I was like, one of the things I think that has to be repeated to become a mantra and become something that's just the truth, that because everybody hears it 100 times everywhere, is it's a white person's problem. Racism isn't going to get fixed until the people who benefit most from it understand it's their problem and
Like
not.
patriarchy.
Yeah, I mean, it's because you're describing about Jesus and the idealism, and it's like women have the same, women suffer the same way with the
Yeah.
you're either Mary Magdalene or Mary the Virgin Mother. Like there's no in between. You're either perfect or a whore. So women have a historical similarity to being constantly put into places that is unrealistic. But I mean that I think a lot of people, when you talk about who benefits from a program like this that we're doing right now, well, not like who benefits from it, but who's responsible for it. Like, Jermaine, you and Dee, it's not your job to wake us up. It's our job to wake us up. Like, Agnes, you and me and Jerry, we're the ones who are supposed to be organizing this to tell our white friends, you people are stupid and need to learn more because we have a problem. You know, racism isn't the victim's problem. Racism is the oppressor's problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that's really hard for people to understand. Like, wait, like, I'm not doing anything wrong. Like, I live my life a happy way. I don't mean anybody harm. I'm just going about my business. Why is that my responsibility? And it's that question that has to be addressed constantly by us, saying, because you not doing anything about the problem continues to contribute to the problem. Because as I came in with this, like, I had it surrounding me, all these messages, and I can only be a product of what I'm getting as a message. And if the message is I'm part of the problem, I need to own my part of the problem and fix what I can fix as one of the causers of the problem. Until I can believe that, and I can tell other people that with conviction. And those people can hear me and say, no, wait a minute. Why are you coming after me? You know, you don't suffer from it. Why is this your cross to bear? Like, it's not my cross to bear. It's my responsibility to bear. I think until we can get that message into something that becomes regularly said and repeated, and, you know, you have to have people come at you going, no, you're wrong, instead of like, you know, I never heard that before. Like, just hear me, oh, I'm so tired of people saying that. Like, when you get to that point, then you're starting to get somewhere. But you don't hear it enough. I don't hear it. I mean, I've heard it, but I don't hear it enough. I don't hear it enough that white people say, this is our problem to fix. Mm-hmm. Because we are the problem. We need to fix it. It should be like, instead of 1 month of Black History Month, it should be 11 months of get your head out of your ass, white people a month.
Do you know the origins of Black History Month?
Not enough, but I did learn about the guy that was behind it. And it's a lot older than I found out it to be.
Yeah, it was, as with everything, it was only supposed to be a week initially. It's supposed to be this week, which is President's Day. And it's because it's Lincoln and Frederick Douglass's birthdays. And it was in 1926 when they put this together. The concept behind it was to push up Black people who were living in a time period where eugenics and all this kind of stuff, you know, it sucked. But it was more so to teach white people that Black history was just history and we should incorporate it. His initial idea was that it was a temporary solution until it's incorporated into all American history and all history, and we're good. So,
and we're still there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Solution.
Here we are.
So
Still
when people ask you, why isn't there a white history month? Then you go, because we failed.
Yeah, unfortunately, we did.
Like
but I think
every day.
do you feel? I mean, with the Black Lives Matter movement that occurred after Floyd and Bria. I'm a lightweight, so this goes to my head and I forget names. Brianna. Do you feel like, because I'm starting to hear for the first time that white people are actually saying it's our responsibility. I had never heard it before, sort of this last 6-9 months. Do you feel like it's changing? Like, do you think that there's there's a movement, and I know you're like, yeah, but it's going to end. I mean,
No, I don't. I have.
You don't feel it.
I have. No, to be honest with you, white supremacy is so strong of a drug
No,
that
we see that.
I no, but in my day-to-day life, this is why I made it personal. In my day-to-day life, the overwhelming majority in the upper 90 percentile of white people showcase aspects of white supremacy so high and demean me so much, even when they're close to me, that I really don't believe that. I believe that the generation that has saw the Tamir Rice and these shootings on camera flipped out when they saw George Floyd, because they were under the impression that this wasn't still happening. I think that they are savable in some way, shape, or form, but it's for them to save. But as far as, do I think that white people will do it? No. Power, it's a very simple thing. Power, just like as a male, men ain't trying to give up power. Giving you Kamala Harris as a vice president is supposed to be like, look at us. I mean, look at us. I mean, we wouldn't vote for her for president, but
She in there. She in there.
Yeah, she's in.
Yeah, she's in there. You should feel really good about it.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
idiotic.
Yeah.
And
that's the same way they felt when Obama
men
came in.
are not giving up patriarchy.
Yeah.
The fact that in 2021, where we can talk to our family back home over the internet in real time and see their picture, face and all that kind of stuff, we still have 70 cents to the dollar a pay when it comes to women. In Sweden, it's the same. It was like 80. It's 8 crowns to 10. Like in Sweden, we're so equal place or whatever. No one wants to give up their power.
No.
And so I don't have a concept of that. What I have is that what I've taken on in my life, and the reason why you hear me speak the way that I do, is I promise myself I will never allow white people to feel comfortable when injustices are happening. So if we're having a normal, pleasant conversation about the weather and this, that, and the other, and it veers off or ask me a question about Black Lives Matter, this, that, and the other, I will punch you in your face with the truth. Because the reason why I need to do this is not about me. Talib Kweli redid this. He's a hip hop MC, and he redid Nina Simone's "For Women," and in that he reimagined "For Women," and he talked about the woman at the end, and she said, "My parents were slaves," and she essentially gave up that, I'm broken. It's not gonna be me who's free, but I'll try my damnedest and I'll kill any MFer that gets in my way when it comes to my children.
Yes.
And so when I look at not just my individual children, but the children underneath me, it's a unique hell to live here, because there are Africans and there are Black people who are not accustomed to asking for something because they're told by the Swedish government that they should be happy that they're here. I have the vocabulary to be able to do that, but that also puts more on me. And so I no longer believe in the concept in the altruism of whiteness, because whiteness is a dead thing to me. It is, and people say individually, all white people I know have some of this floating around in them in any way, shape, or form. They center it on themselves, like you did earlier. They dehumanize me. They dehumanize Jermaine. It is a poison that I'm just not going to deal with directly. I'm going to deal with, if you're around my children, if I choose to have you in my life, I'm going to tell you the truth. But as a general concept that white people are doing better, white people have been supposedly doing better since the beginning of time. The abolitionists were supposedly doing better, but still didn't see Black people as valuable enough for them to get reparations, for them to be treated safely after they created the wealth for the country. that while we're celebrating President's Day, Lincoln wanted black people to get on a boat and go back to Africa with no money. His whole thing was like, yo, we'll pay for the boat.
You're free now.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't have that. I don't preach that to my children, and they have a white mom. I don't say, it'll never happen or anything. I don't want to give them my 45-year-old perspective. But the truth of the matter is, it's all on me. And I have to say that the thing about being over here is it's only on you. It's only on you. Do you think their mom is calling up the school about my son being called the N-word? No. It's only on me. So when it comes to whiteness and whether or not white people work it out, I'm gonna tell you the truth. I'm not gonna be 16-year-old me, but I'm not sitting there, with my pom-poms on, hoping you all make it through the basic level first grade finish line. Because there is nothing in my entire life, my parents' life, my grandparents' life, or anyone before me in my ancestors' life that showcases that will ever exist. And I'm at the point where we need to snatch power. And I'm not talking about violent up or anything like that. What you saw in Georgia, that made me happy. That was black people that did that. And if I got to move my thing, I'm in Alabama. If I can get more people to come to Alabama and so we could just take it over, I want to do that because I want to have the power that goes with moving this. Because if we go at the rate of whiteness, I will be an old man and I will hate this. So that's my honest opinion.
I think you touched on when you said dehumanizing. I think I've thought about this question that I asked earlier a lot because I grew up in Kansas in the middle, in a big town in Kansas of about 40,000 people. So
yeah,
not so big.
I grew up.
Yeah, exactly. I grew up on the poor side of town, and therefore I had a lot of different friends of different races and colors. I mean, it was just the way it was. And we played a lot of basketball and a lot of football and a lot of sports. And I saw them as they were my friends. And even more so, they were human. I knew them, they were just like me. Then when I got into high school, I moved to the other side of town. And we were bussed out to a small town called Bueller. And that town was probably 2,000 people, right? But that's where the high school was. And a quarter of Hutch was bussed out there. There was, in my entire 4 years of going there was one black person that I ever went to that school. And I saw the exact opposite. I saw this dehumanization of black people there. People that that were my friends, they start using the N-word and things like this, and I have to defriend them because that's not how I was raised up. And so when you say dehumanization, I think you're right, and I think a lot of the solution is in some way to a humanity. I don't know how to say that. Is to humanize everybody again. Because when we dehumanize everybody, I mean, that's when we have problems, I think.
Yeah, but I would just add to your small child version versus teenage version. The part that it stops at is they can always play with us. They can always do with this. But a system is different than individual people's feelings. I mean, in slavery, there were people, and in Jim Crow, there are people who love the crap out of their enslaved people, who love the crap out of the woman that fed them and all this kind of stuff. You hear the most racist people. I hate all black people, but I love Aunt Jemima. Aunt Jemima was the best. She had the best biscuits. And she cleaned up my knee when I fell. I felt safer with her than with my mom. But those things mean nothing to me, because what we're talking about is a system which will block people like Jermaine and I from getting a loan or a small business loan or grant or whatever. That system is what we're fighting against. How people feel towards me, it doesn't work if the whole system is working against me. And
Yeah,
I think
no, I
that's where
understand.
we need to get out of the concept of like, I love everybody, I don't see skin color, blah, 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 because those things don't really have a tangible way of making it equal. I want to live in meritocracy. A meritocracy would be that if you work hard, you benefit from it. If you're a genius at something, you benefit from it. And we have never seen this meritocracy, and it doesn't exist in Sweden, it doesn't exist in the States. So I would like to see that in my children's lifetime. That's what I'm fighting for. And I ain't worried about people being their friends. I've been having white friends my entire life. It's not an accomplishment. It's nothing. Because they still get to live better lives than I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's basically in general how things are. It's not even a have been, it's an are. And us having to and Black Americans having to deal with that is something that we have to deal with, and probably will decades on will continue with it. And it is up to all others to really change, because we can't do it for anybody. And I can't even say the word fix. It's not even a point of fixing. It has to be a whole lot of change, and that change isn't going to come so soon. But as everything here we've talked about, things can be spoken about, explained, lessons can be learned. People can get a better understanding of society in general, from last year, from 20 years ago, from 50 years ago, and now, in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of Black Lives Matter protests, in the midst of trying to work again. All these things have just collided into these last, 15 months? And just come to, and it's like a pimple. It was a pimple just waiting to burst, and things that have to be dealt with. And unfortunately, no, they're not really going to be dealt with properly. If Blacks are talking about wanting justice or wanting, and wanting equality, and all of a sudden I hear about where we're going to change the name of Aunt Jemima syrup to whatever mill, whatever it's changed to, that's not a real big issue for us. Though that's not what we asked for. That's not equality. That's just changing the name of a bottle. That doesn't do anything for Black Americans. What? Because you changed the name of Aunt Jemima syrup to something else, to Miller
No, but
Company.
I
No, but I mean, I read it, I understood what they were doing, but that is not there. A lot of things that were happening weren't exactly the main reasons of that. Didn't give any Black Americans equality. It's like, well, we're being fair, so we're going to do this, and we're going to be fair, and we're going to do that, and that wasn't right. Even currently, I need to probably actually have to wrap. But even currently, when we're talking about now with this, I think I saw this museum thing when they talked about having this room or area called the White Sea, and I was like, what's wrong with it? There's a Black Sea and a Red Sea, and no, but that's not politically correct or whatever, and they're going to change it to just sea. And I'm okay, yeah.
Yeah,
who are you doing that? It's a point of whose conscience are you doing that for? Who are you doing that for? So that's also something that needs to go in depth of discussion when they make these, when people are asking, we want equality, and they're like, but we changed the bottle of the syrup and we did this, and it, that doesn't that all the time does not float the boats. One last thing, real Beth, you want to say something real quick? Just give it real quick.
Yeah, no. I mean, I agree with you. I'm just like, I still think that so much of us is a product. Like, when you're as a woman, when you get treated like crap, it's because you grew up with people thinking whatever they were doing was supposed to be all right. So they're like, what's the problem? Why are you reacting to what I'm doing? It's so normal.
Yeah.
And I think that as a woman, that's where I'm interested as well, in fighting that fight of like making that change. I do see the value in changing the environment. Not necessarily because, not that that we shouldn't be getting that 100 cents on the dollar instead of 80 cents, but that if you change what's affecting and influencing all of us, you can bring the messages faster and stronger because they're going to be received more positively.
I mean, and as Dee said, the persons who created the issue have to fix that issue.
Yeah.
That's in essence what it is.
Also,
That's the bottom line.
I equated to the way that I
Dee.
was raised. I equated the way I was raised. I grew up really strict religion. So from the second I was born, I was always inundated with this information. Jesus, God's watching you, so on and so forth. I went to church schools. I went to church every week. I probably could count on one hand how many times I missed church before the age of 18. And what it did is it shaped the world around me and never gave me the opportunity to see the world for what it was, because everything was answered within this super strict religion, because all of my teachers were a part of this at school. All my friends pretty much were a part of this. So all I knew was this one thing. And when it got to the point where I started to question things, and the questions were like, well, we'll find out when we get to heaven. I was like, so I started to question on my own. But everything around me pushed me towards staying within the path of this. And it wasn't until my early 20s, and it took me 2 years to say, I don't believe that Jesus is a deity, because that's how ingrained it was in me. And this is not a critique of Christianity. It is a critique of someone telling you what the world is and then reinforcing it in your school, in your home life, all the way on. Racism is exactly that. You don't know what's up and what's down because everything is answered for you. And it's reinforced, whether it's your school, your TV, whatever. Everything around society is telling you that. And the reason why Black people know this is because we knew it ourselves. We were taught we weren't as beautiful as we were. We were taught our hair sucked and we need to have long flowing hair. We were taught our lips and everything else was just terrible. And then even within Blackness, we were taught lighter skinned people were better than darker skinned people because they were closer to white. And you know how many people told us, oh, I have Native American in my family, and all this kind of stuff. And oh, my great grandmother, her dad was white. He raped
Cherokee,
her, but yeah, and then Cherokee and all this kind of crap. So we know what it is like.
Yeah.
But I think the thing is like, think of it as like a religious, the version of like super, super religious people. Because if you know any of us, you know that we struggled our way out of it if we got out of it. If you've ever talked to super religious people, not people who they could just show up for church or whatever. I'm talking every single day I had to pray before I went to bed. Every day I had to pray in the morning. Every day I had to do this. I went to school. We prayed at school. They told us the world was 6,000 years old and people don't know what they're talking about. And so everything in my life was shaped for this thing. And if that works for my family members and all that kind of stuff, I have no issue. I'm not critiquing them. I'm telling you that when someone tells you that this is down and this is up, and no one else around you tells you anything different, it's going to take a while for you to get out of that space. And so I always say it from that perspective. And I mean, patriarchy is built into religion as well. I was one of the first people that I knew that was just like, but why are women supposed to be subservient to us? Well, you'll have to ask God.
Ooh, and on that note, but on and seriously on it, I mean, but thank you guys so much. I know it's been a great talk, and it's a very open one. The fact that it is open to more conversation regarding this, not just in Black History Month, but continuously. And for the people who are watching and listening, this is the point where you can step in and be a part of these types of conversations, and have this a safe place to have the conversation. Go out and find books that will give you more information.
Please.
Definitely. Google is your friend. You know, I implore you to do those things and
talk with other white people about it.
Yeah, and be open to the information that you receive. You know, if you open the book and you're like, I don't know that didn't happen, I don't believe that, then you're not really ready to listen to anything else. You're not not even listen to us. But if you're open and ready to listen and to receive the information that you're given, even if you may not agree with all of it, this is still a piece of information that you didn't have before, that now you can tumble around in your head. And again, thank you, Beth. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Jerry. And thank you, Agnes. She had to step away. I really had a great time talking to all of you today. And
thank you, Jermaine.
Thank you,
Jermaine, for
putting this together.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to eventually have another one of these in the coming months. But until then, I'd like to thank everyone out there who was listening, and you guys as well, for joining in on this social conversation in Black History Month. And like I said, hopefully these will continue. Please subscribe to the American Club YouTube here at Ann Club Sweden. Also check out our American Club of Sweden website and our Facebook pages and our Twitter and our Instagram, because we post all of our events there. Please read the stuff that is on our website. We have a lot of information regarding the group. We have all of our board members there. Any one of them you can contact and speak to them regarding any kind of situation that is encompassed in our website regarding the American Club. But again, thank you all for being here this evening, and we hope to see you again soon. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Hello.
Bye-bye.